what first attracted you to fitness? Can you kind of talk about your early beginnings of your own health journey?
Yeah, of course. I think, as you mentioned, we had a bit of a conversation before we hit record, and I think, my beginnings were similar to yours. So, as a young man playing sports, my sports were similar to yours. I boxed and then I played football. And so it's like, all right, you look at the athletes that do that, and you're like, man, they got all these muscles. Like, I'm like 12 or 13 years old, and we start working out. And my dad bought a weight set for our garage. Like imagine my dad, he's like this tough, like man's man from Texas. He had lost his leg to cancer before I was even born. So it's
Wow.
like I only knew him one way, which was like this one-legged guy, tough as nails. And he's like, all right, let's get this weight set. So it's the old school ones, Michael. You probably don't remember this because you look like a pretty young man, but they had like the concrete inside of them. They had plastic around the outside. They'd always like crack open and stuff. You'd see them like in people's basements. Terrible weight sets. But we bought one of those and it came with this poster. And I remember we rolled the poster out and did like every single exercise on the poster. And we were both so sore, like I couldn't even wash my hair for like a week, But I think, it's similar to your beginnings. It's like, all right, well, I like sports. I need to be a better version of myself to be better at sports. So
Right.
let's start, training for that. So that's where it started. And it sort of evolved into, I ended up being a decent athlete. But what I found is I actually enjoyed the training as much as I enjoyed, the sport itself. And I wasn't good enough to make a living doing a sport. So it was like, well, I really enjoy the weight room and the environment around that. And, I worked at like a powerlifting bodybuilding gym. When I was in high school, it was like hardcore, no air conditioning or anything. And I worked at the front desk my entire, high school career. And so like I was around these like world-class powerlifters and bodybuilders. And it was just a really cool environment, and it's sort of like a subculture to be part of. And so it just kind of stuck. It was a very impressionable time for me, and I loved that environment. And people were really cool, a little bit crazy, but really cool. And so that was really it. That's how I got my start. It's just like you, training for sports. And then the more I got into it, the more I liked it. And then when sports didn't work out long term, I thought, well, if I can do this somehow and make a living doing it, then I would love to do that. And that's sort of the birth of the entire business, to be honest.
When did the whole business aspect start to take form within your mind, or when did it start to command your attention in the way that fitness had? And did it at some point actually replace the time and energy that you were placing on your fitness journey? I imagine that it would once you actually started scaling the business itself. But when did that happen for you?
Yeah, so I started training people at around 20 years old, and I'm old, so that was like 33 years ago. And so you can imagine I'm training people, right? And it's like before anybody knew what a trainer was. It's like, what does a trainer do? It's like, well, we show you how to exercise and we hold you accountable. It's like, okay, and people needed it then, just like they do now. And so, but I was going to people's homes and bouncing around for different health clubs. It was so early on, Michael, it sounds crazy in the fitness industry now, but I would go into a health club and say, hey, I would like to be a personal trainer here. And they're like, I don't know what that is. Like, what is that? And I'm like, well, I'll take some of your members. They'll pay me. I'll help them get in better shape. And they didn't even want a percentage of any of the revenue. They were just like, yeah. Just as long as you're a member here, just leave us alone. So everything was just membership driven at the time. Wow. And that's how I got started. And now I was in college, so I'm bouncing around from home to home, a couple of different health clubs. And, got this idea. It's like, wow, wouldn't it be cool if I didn't have to travel around everywhere just from an efficiency standpoint, could be in one place. Plus, it's kind of a high-end service. And you notice that like going to people's homes, you're developing these really tight relationships. You're providing a really great service. At the time I was making per hour, like an amazing rate. So I was actually, completely self-sufficient, paying my way through school, apartment, car, like the whole thing was great. And I thought, would it be a novel idea to put four walls around this business, a customer experience, if you will, around this service of personal training. And that was it. And on a shoestring budget, we built out a small 1,500 square foot facility and launched, at least as far as I know, because there was no internet, which was also really hard to believe, that we might have been one of the only, or certainly in the Atlanta area, the first ever personal training only facility dedicated to just that service. I mean, imagine that was well before boutique fitness was even a thing, and there wasn't any studios or boot camps or anything like that. And so, yeah, that's really how we got our start. So it wasn't necessarily a well-crafted idea around, hey, I've got this model and I want to scale it to, this worldwide business. And then eventually we're going to franchise it. It was just like, hey, man, I don't want to travel around as much. I really enjoy what I do. And it would be nice to have like a customer experience around it where we could give towel service and have a nice, clean facility and a safe place for people to train. So that was it. That was the impetus to start the whole thing. And that was a long time ago. But I'll tell you what, man, I've never done anything else. It's been amazing.
What year was that when you started that small gym?
November of 1992 is the month and year that the actual facility opened.
Okay.
As crazy as this is, Michael, I'm still sitting in that facility right now. Isn't that nuts?
Has it grown and expanded in terms of the square footage?
Yes. Yeah, it's a lot bigger now. So,
Okay.
We grew it. Yeah, you're like, surely it's not the exact same space, but it's literally the same space. Like the door that I walk through every morning, I've been walking through for 31 years, which is nuts, right? But it's much different now. It's a corporate office now as opposed to like a full-on gym, and it's certainly the area around it's changed and everything. But yeah, it's been an awesome journey.
And of course, since that time, over the last 30 years, we've seen this explosion in the fitness and well-being space. I mean, I don't know the exact numbers, but I would presume we're talking about a multi-billion-dollar industry. And fitness is such an entry point, I think, with the evolution of the internet, man. Like, we've seen personal trainers and nutritionists and so many other people who can help people along that fitness journey take their skill set online and start selling that through social media and the internet and so forth. And I mean, there's so many quote unquote influencer stories that you see and read about today of people that got their start just doing that same exact thing, from a passion for fitness themselves, bodybuilding or training or competing, and maybe taking that to their first small location or not even, and just building their business online. Back in those early days, and then I guess through the early 2000s, like, was there any franchise or fitness entrepreneur that you looked up to or that you learned from when you were getting started?
Yeah, I can't think of anyone specifically. I mean, there were certainly people in our industry. Now, again, no one was really doing what I was doing, so it was hard to find like a direct mentor that was like, hey, have you opened a personal training facility like this? It was usually a lot of the guys in the industry at that time, they owned like a big health club, right? So your typical, like, I'll just throw a name out there, like a Gold's Gym or a 24 Hour, or one of those kind of brands that might be familiar with folks, LA Fitness, even Lifetime, but that's more of a family place. But a place that just, you had equipment and you might have personal training going on inside of there. But I think, and you've probably certainly realized this through just doing the podcast, is like there's something to learn from everyone. So one thing I think that I did well at that time was I would certainly engage with anyone who would, answer some questions, right? And ask about just business concepts, whether it was, tax strategies or just anything around the fitness space, while also running a model that really, quite honestly, hadn't been done before until that point. So, there was some fitness education companies that were out there but again, they were teaching more of the mechanisms of general membership, big, giant family-based clubs. But I could learn some things from them as well. Customer experience, sales, right? All those same frameworks work in a smaller business. So we would just, as you know, you take what you can, right, from those things that work, discard the things that don't, and you keep moving. There's always something to be learned. So most of my influences weren't in my exact business model, but still very, very helpful. There's some really sharp people in the fitness space, whether it was Gold's Gym or any of these guys. And what that ended up leading to is once we got out and started doing more education, then we landed on a really interesting model where we scaled personal training from one-on-one into this what we call small group, or personal training in a small group, which was really up to 6 people with one coach. Now, once we did that, it was like, man, it was less expensive for the consumer. It was more scalable. The club can make more money. The coaches can make more money. The clients paid less. I'm like, this is a win-win all the way around. And that was our new model. And so that's the way we were servicing training in like right around the year 2000. And so that put us in a situation where we were like highest revenue per square foot facility in the country. So then that put me on the speaking circuit. So some of the same events that I would go to, now I'm speaking, and now I'm speaking about a whole new business model that no one's really done, which is like, I have a studio that just does personal training, and people are like, oh, that's weird. But it was interesting, from a lot of folks because they hadn't done it yet. And when they looked at our revenue based on the small square footage, square footage that we had, it was like, again, highest revenue per square foot in the country. So that put me on the map, and thankfully I had taken a few courses and just learned how to put a sentence together so I could get in front of people and articulate ideas. And then, once we started doing that, people would start asking, like, can you help me build a sales system for my business? Or can you help me, design workouts for clients? It was like all the pieces, part and parcel of the program of what we did. People wanted to buy it, and we started selling it as consulting days and consulting sort of projects. And then eventually I was just like, look, man, we're answering the same questions over and over again. Let's put this thing on an online platform. And we launched at the time what we called licensing. And that was sort of a white label version of what we do, whether you were a CrossFit gym or a big giant family tennis center. And it was like, all right, we'll approach each project as a consulting project, and then we'll deploy parts of our platform to you to power whatever it is that we think you need. And we would do pricing and comp structures and all these things around the business model. And we did that to the tune of 2,500 clubs everywhere from India to Tasmania and everything in between. So here we went from this tiny little thing we started in college, and all of a sudden we're like all over the world. We've got people with alloy tattoos, on their body. I mean, just nuts. And so much fun. And then in 2019, it was like, look, we were being now approached by like what we would consider direct competitors, like boutique fitness, saying, can you build our sales system? Can you write our workouts? And I was like, instead of doing it for them, if they're just like us, we should just make a run at it on our own. And that's after sitting on the advisory board for like an Anytime Fitness, which has 5,000 locations, with Gold's Gym. So I had already gotten a nice peek under the covers at franchising.
Yep.
And we were like, look, man, like we should make a run at our own franchise. And again, that was in the very end of 2019. We launched a full-on franchise, which is different than the white label thing that we were doing. So we've been through a lot of iterations. I got to tell you, it was like one facility to multiple facilities to, consulting to licensing, and then eventually to franchising over, a long period of time, over 31 years. But every step has been challenging and amazing at the same time.
So I want to dig into a couple of those transition points that you just described, and that was a great overview of the growth that the business is seeing. At what point did you start to have the foresight to where you said, this is more than just a single location where we're going to do personal training and bring in a core group of people from the local area? How did the idea to scale start to take shape, and how did you act on that when it did?
Well, I would love to say that it was part of the grand plan, but quite honestly, it took people like beating me over the head with it, and I'm not embarrassed to say that, because I think it's also important to have a culture where you can stay focused on one thing while keeping your eyes open to opportunities, right? So I would have never thought to like, hey, we're gonna start this brick and mortar, we're gonna land on this amazing model, and then once we do, I'm gonna take it out to the world. It was literally someone local in my market. He owned a Gold's Gym, and we were introduced by a couple of friends because I was now speaking in the industry. And he's just a great guy. He was an older man, almost 80 years old at the time, had been in the Marine Corps, just a squared away guy, but he was always looking for what's next, that slight edge in his market. And he owned 3 Gold's Gyms, in the Atlanta area. Okay. So he said, hey, I want to come visit you. It was a Saturday morning. So we came out and we were slammed, and it's like, you've got all these groups of people working out with trainers, and, he's like, this is amazing. I've never seen anything like this. And I'm like, yeah, the average person in here is paying like $350 a month. He was just like, wow, because that's a lot of money when you're comparing that to maybe a $40 a month, gym membership. And right. So I'm like, yeah, everybody's getting coaching. It's just at different, like look a little different than what you're used to. And it really took him saying, can you take this and help us do this like in our gym? And I was like, well, maybe, let me think about it. And sure enough, it was like, sure, we can do that. And again, that was after doing a lot of consulting, but it was different to say like, can you literally just stick this in my club and not necessarily run it for them, but teach them to fish, right? Can you build something that we can run as a default for our personal training program? And so that was, someone had to ask me for it before I even had the idea. So I'd love to say I came up with this great idea, but that wasn't it at all. And so that was it. That was the impetus to say, sure, we can do that. And it was just on the front edge of being able to offer something digitally. This is probably 16 years ago or so. So like learning management systems were like brand new, and we put everything onto a learning management system so we could deploy it better. And then that was it. And we were off and running, but it was not a grand master plan at all. I would love to say it was, but it was not.
And you mentioned that back in the day, there were some Gold Gyms and a couple other places in the area. You were able to charge about an 8x multiple on what other local or franchise or chain locations might have been asking their customers, say $30, $40, maybe $50 a month. What allowed you to go into market with that premium on pricing in terms of your differentiation? Like, walk me through the specifics of what that customer experience actually felt like for the people that were joining.
Yeah, I think when you zoom out a little bit, when you look at so personal training at that point in time was a thing at this point, right? Like we had grown up with the industry. Now people understood what a trainer was. But if you think about it, Michael, you would say join a gym. So let's say it's Michael's gym. So join Michael's gym. I pay him $40 a month. Yep. And then I'm in there working out. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. Maybe I got a machine orientation or something to kind of use them, but I'm not motivated. I need an appointment with someone. The whole same story, right? So what am I going to do? Well, then I'm going to hire a trainer. And so that already was happening in mass. So most of our competition were trainers inside of big box gyms, but now I have to buy a membership so that I can even get to a trainer that I can hire, right? And typically all the training was done in a one-on-one setting. So it was more expensive. So let's just say again, at that time, maybe $50 an hour. So, you could come to us, not have to buy a membership, get your training and pay $25 for a session, right? As opposed to 50. So it's half the cost, and you were sharing a little bit of time with a group of people, but each program was still personalized. So it's still personal training. There's a little bit of community there, which is awesome, right? So you get a little bit of what you might get from a class, even though that's a dirty word, the C word for us. It's like, no, it's training, but you still get a little bit of that sociability, but you don't have to buy a membership and wander around at a big giant gym, which most of our customers don't want anyway. They're like, it's a destination place. You want to drive up, go in, get your workout, get the heck out of there, right? You don't want to mess with all the rigmarole of all the other members and the giant locker rooms, and just not their scene. And so we weren't really creating something new at that point. We were just creating something better. Like if you needed a personal trainer specifically, you could hire one in a facility one-on-one, but it'd be predicated on joining that facility first, or you could come directly to us, and that's what we do. And I will say, having that brand promise on the door, even perceptually, we were better at it than someone who might work part-time at a Gold's Gym as a trainer. I mean, this is all that we do, right? And I'll tell you what, the evidence of that was that I think at one point, and it still holds true, 80-something% of our clients that were paying a membership for training in our club were also members of other fitness concepts, typically a regular health club. Mm-hmm. So they were buying that membership. Now you would think, okay, well, that's a financial barrier, right? Like if they buy that membership, why wouldn't they do their training there? Because they saw us as an expert in this one vertical. And so they might go to the regular gym to walk on the treadmill or what have you, but they would come to us for their personal training because that's where we were the experts and we were better at it than most of the individual trainers.
Right. That makes sense. Okay. Take me back to the beginning and let's talk numbers for a moment. So how much did you put in to launch the business? Talk about your customer growth in those initial years, like how many people were actually coming and signing up, and then at what point were you profitable and what kind of revenue were you seeing?
Yeah, so I think all in, I remember taking out a loan for $36,000, which is laughable now. I had a local guy like craft some equipment. It was literally like welded it up in his garage. I knew him and he made good stuff. It was just homemade stuff.
Nice.
And yeah, just crazy. So we opened on a shoestring budget. We didn't do any marketing. My initial, way to fill up the business was I just took all the clients that I was working with and had them come to me. So there's instant full schedule for myself. And then I just grabbed friends in the industry that I knew from these different health clubs and brought them in, and they brought their clients with them. And that's kind of the way we started. So there wasn't a lot of ramp on, marketing to get up to speed. But once we were in market, like we're the only thing around and no one did what we did. So a lot of people would call our entire business. I mean, unless you were in the yellow pages, which is laughable now, we didn't have any real advertising. We had some flyers, we did a couple of mailers, and we just got mostly referrals. So if your thing is good enough, people will find you. People will talk and people will find you. So we built a business up through referrals. Now, at the time that we switched to the other format that I mentioned, right, where we went from like training people from one-on-one to training them in these small groups, that was around year 2000. So you can imagine we've been in business 7 years. At that point, we were doing 3,000 one-on-one sessions a month. So, again, well over $1 million a year in revenue out of a very small space. I would say the margins on that were not nearly as good as they are in the current model or in the model that we landed on, which was putting people into small groups. So you get excited about that top end revenue, but like the profit margins on that were pretty low. Okay. Because I didn't do a great job of the way I set up my comp structures and everything else. We had remedied that by 2000, but I throw that number out there now and people get really excited. It's like, wow, $1 million is good revenue, right? For a small footprint business. It is, but the margins on it weren't great in that one-on-one setting, right? So, 3,000 one-on-one sessions a month. It's like, I think we've done this several iterations, Michael, where we'll abandon what is seemingly a very successful business. The opportunity cost of going to like maybe a better business. So imagine taking a business that's doing 3,000 one-on-one sessions a month. It's not broken in any way, shape, or fashion, and saying, you know what, we're going to move to this new model. And we did it because, it's a little bit of like what Henry Ford said about if I asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses, right? They didn't know they wanted a car. They didn't even know what the concept of a car was. I felt the same way in our business. So you just have to have a little bit of trust and a little bit of foresight to say, okay, we have people coming to our gym that are saying, can I bring a friend? And we say, of course, we can train 2 people at one time. That's not difficult. And then they pay a little less. The hour is more valuable. I'm now helping more people because I've got more bandwidth, right? And my coaches make more. So the gym makes more, the coaches make more, as I mentioned before. Clients pay less. Like, this is a good thing. And then they're like, well, can we bring another friend that's on our tennis team as an example? I'm like, sure. So now there's a third person in the hour. They're even having more fun. They're paying a little bit less. I'm still making more. Coaches making more. So I thought, well, this is the way we should do it. And so just seeing this empirical evidence we're like, all right, rip the Band-Aid off. We're moving our whole model from one-on-one training to up to 6 people with one coach, which was not an easy thing to do. Same thing when we went from licensing to franchising, booming business. It's like, oh, we're going to pivot and go here. So those things aren't taken lightly, but I think, along the way, maybe that's a good lesson for people listening. Like sometimes you have to do it, right? Sometimes you have to give up the good for the great, if that makes sense.
So talk about that transition from to licensing and to franchising and what that entailed, and then kind of what you learned about scaling a business and team building and management in both instances.
Yeah, I think what I learned mostly was if you want something to scale, it has to be dead simple. I mean, like our franchise now, very simple. 130 members, right? Our average spend is around $300 a month. It's just a dead simple model. But, we've sold 115 thus far. We'll have 50 open by the year's end. Most of that growth has come, in the last 18 months or so. So you put that many in market, I don't care how simple it is, the scale alone is going to make it complex. So I think that's one thing we learned for sure, is like things have to be dead simple. I also learned that like along that journey, anybody that's listening that's an entrepreneur, and we spend a lot of time, like I teach entrepreneur classes, by the way, at a local college. So I'm in the perfect business for me. I love fitness and I love entrepreneurship, and a franchise allows me to give people both, right? I can help people become entrepreneurs and I can help them put fitness into their local market. So super happy as a side note. Love it. Love what I'm doing. But, as an entrepreneur, it's often described as like a self-help journey disguised as a business. And that's what it is. So I would say like one thing that I learned personally was for me to move up, right, to level up, it's like you have to stack skills until you've earned the opportunity to be in a better opportunity vehicle. So like I can't have 2,500 licensed clubs and be the same leader and have the same thought process and the same style of hiring and scaling and communicating that I did when I had one gym and I was in there working every day. Yeah, I have to be a different person. Not core values, not not that. You just have to think and make decisions, and the very things that made you successful when you were in your gym every day might be diametrically opposed to what will make you successful to scale a bigger business, right? Same thing going to franchising, Michael. It's like, all right, what I did in licensing to grow that, I cannot do that to grow this franchise. So I've got to upskill myself because now I'm even in a better opportunity vehicle. So it's like each step along the way, and that's life, by the way, right? Upskill, better opportunity vehicle. And that's going to keep going. When you hit these milestones, you move that goalpost and you upskill yourself again. And, hopefully that will create a better opportunity vehicle. And what comes with that is a lot of discomfort. Imposter syndrome never goes away. It's always there because you're always at the hairy edge of your skill set, right? Pushing for the next thing. And so I think that was something that I learned personally, and also just learning through scale that you think things are simple until they're not. It became our 5th core value, which is keep it simple, KISS. And it has to be dead simple to scale. So I'd say it's the 2 biggest things. Is like the business is only going to go as far as the leader can evolve, and also it better be just dead simple to scale.
The thing that I'm presently wrestling with around that is patience, because I think we want to be able and we want to believe that we can upskill ourselves within a matter of days and weeks. And while you can do a lot of work in that time, realistically, for any large change to take place within, it's going to take months, if not years, and probably a decade, for real transformation to really change who you are as a person is going to take a long time. So that's something that I'm working through right now personally. But
well, listen, man, keep going. I think like hearing you say that, like I can tell you already that you're wired the right way. Like when I've got a good friend that always says like he can tell how smart someone is or how successful they'll be based on the time frame they talk about. Like if you want to get rich quick in a year, like it might happen. Good on you. But if you're like, hey man, you're a young man, right? I'm not. I'm 53. So I'm figuring shit out now that I had no idea about 7 years ago. It's like you've got a long way to go. And I'm not saying that you can have urgency, right, and still be in the infinite game. Like you want to use Simon Sinek thing. It's like you can play the infinite game, and there's still finite scores that need to be met along the way. There's things that need to be done, right? But if the goal is just to keep growing and stay in the game, then you've got this long time horizon. And the longer your time horizon, the more you're going to accomplish, right? So I think you can have both urgency and patience kind of baked into the same person or journey, if that makes sense. But look, man, the best advice I've heard, the best way I've heard it described is like aim as high as you possibly can conceive. I mean, way above and beyond what you could think is imaginable, right? And then move in that direction with, bring everything to bear that you have to move in that direction. And even if that changes over time or you don't get to whatever that perceived place was, you're going to be infinitely better off if you do that and you move in that direction, right? What could happen? It's like, it's good. You're going to be better off no matter what. And I think that's life, summed up in a journey. And again, if entrepreneurship is, a self-help journey disguised as a business, it's that. It's like you're going to go as far as you can take it. And that really has a lot to do with where you are mentally. And are you of that mindset? And can you stay in that mindset for a long period of time? And if you can, dude, sky's the limit.
So can you talk a little bit about mindset, and then also going back to those transition points of moving to licensing and then to franchising? What were one or two of the skill sets that emerged for you, or that you realized that you needed to master in order to be successful during those points in the business?
Yeah, and I think delegating, I think when you're in a small business, you're kind of all things. So you're the smartest person in your business when you have 8 employees in one location. That's okay.
Yeah.
You're the marketing guy, you're this guy, you're that guy. Well, then you go to licensing. It's like, okay, well, you can't do everything. So it's like, now I have to have a salesperson, and they have to be better at sales than I am, right? Hopefully. If they're not, then we have a problem. And so now you have a finance person. It's like, all right, well, if I can run spreadsheets better than my CFO, then we're in trouble, right? So it's like, what you learn is to delegate, but in a way that it's also a little bit of a death of your ego. Like, I often joke, like, the thing I'm most proud of in the franchise is I'm like the dumbest guy on the team, right? I say that as a joke. My only function is like, try to hold the culture together and hire the right people and make sure that we're all, rowing in the same direction. It's like, but it's not my job to be the best at finding real estate for franchisees, or, negotiating leases, or the construction phase, or the pre-sale, or the franchise coaching, or all the things that go into having a successful brick and mortar business. I've got people in all of those seats that can just run circles around me in their functions. And that makes me a good leader, right? But if you don't know that, to your point, how do you, what are those inflection points? It's a little bit of death of your ego, right? You have to just be willing to hire people a lot smarter than you are. And as you do that, you have these aha moments along the way. I would say that's been the biggest, lesson for me. It's just like, all right, learn to delegate. You can have a little bit of knowledge of what's going on in the business. That's key. I think, obviously, I've been in it forever. But at the same time, I've got a lot of smart people around me. And that's what's going to make or break me, my ability to attract, lead, and keep really good people on the team.
Got it. Talk a little bit about the process that a new franchisee would go through when joining the Alloy umbrella, and what type of things do you guys look for in people that you bring on to serve as an extension of the business as a franchisor?
I love that question. That is $1 million question, because for us, we always say no stinkers, right? And what we mean by that is we're trying to expand this brand, and we want to do it with integrity. And the only way to do that is to pick great franchise partners. At the end of the day, we're taking a piece of the top line revenue. It's called a royalty. We take a percentage of top line revenue. We have to have the right partners, because at the end of the day, you're right. Now there's a third party involved. There's someone else between us and the end user and the customer. And so it has to be the right partner. So I think for us, we're looking for leaders. That's it. And there's different ways. There's quiet leaders, there's outgoing leaders, there's people that are really good at certain functions of the business that can lead that way. We always use this one lens. I heard it on a podcast once as it related to dating. And it was a young woman was talking to her mother, and she said, "Oh, honey, I want a guy who is successful." And she's telling her mom, "Mom, I want a guy who's successful. He's this. And she just lays out this perfect profile of essentially just a straight up winner. And that's the kind of person I'm looking for. And I'm not sure what was going on in her life, but her mom looks at her in the most heartbreaking way and says, "Oh, honey, you're not the person that you're looking for is looking for." It's like, oof. So we use that often when we're looking for candidates, because their ability, Michael, to attract, lead, and keep really good talent, that's the crux of the whole thing. Like, we're not going to let you put it in the wrong place. We have 7 layers of real estate criteria, right? They're going to make you put it in the right place. We're not going to let you pay too much in rent. I mean, all those things are like, that's math at the end of the day, right? Good. Put it in the right place. Second, though, can you attract and can you lead the right people? So when we're vetting candidates, and remember, franchising is awesome because they're vetting us, we're vetting them just as hard, because at the end of the day, we've got a partnership to get into, right? For at least 10 years. So I'm looking for people who can attract and lead really good people, because most of our franchisees are investors. They're not going to stand in their club and service revenue. So they're going to have to attract really good operators, right? And coaches that are going to work there as well. Now, it's a low labor model. It's only 3 or 4 people in each club, but they still have to get out there and hire them and attract them. So what I'm looking at from them is like, again, are they the person that they're looking for is looking for? If that makes sense.
It does, yeah. What about startup costs or some of the specifics that your franchisees need to be prepared to bring to the table, or the investors who are buying the business and then hiring a team themselves? What should they be thinking about?
Yeah, for sure. So, in the franchise agreements, there's something called an item 7, which is the expense claims. And these are audited each year. And that's the great thing about franchising. It's like all your stuff's out there. Like, you can't, fudge any numbers. Everything's audited. So right now, our startup cost sits somewhere between like 200 and 4 plus, right, in that category. Now we're hitting right in the middle of that right now, so kind of averaging around 300-ish to get one open. That's before you would get what's called TI, which is like if you negotiated in your lease for your landlord to give you some money back, after you open. That can be anywhere from 25 to 50 grand or whatever that might be. So like we just say, like, keep it safe, like around 300K is kind of what we're hitting right now. Now, granted, we haven't opened in Manhattan or LA or whatever, and we understand that's going to be more expensive, but there's pricing tiers to offset that.
Okay.
But that's what we're looking at there. So that's what the owner should expect. Now, what's in that number? Literally everything, like the franchise fee, right? And that's what you pay first to get started. And then it's going to cover everything else, including 3 months of operating costs and a really hefty pre-sale spend, because that's what we're really good at. It's getting your gym full before you open. So it's like, all right, that's going to cover all of that plus 3 months of operating expenses. So that's all in. That's not just like what the equipment cost or what it costs to build it out. That's every single expense it's going to take you from soup to nuts to get the place open.
Got it.
And not bad. Again, we have all types of different franchisees. Some are very successful in other sectors, and so they're self-funding. You can do a 401k rollover. It's called ROBS, and basically you can take your 401k and move it into a different entity, and that can fund. Sort of like it's seen as an investment, so there's no penalty for doing that. That's a creative way to do it. Or you can do a traditional SBA loan. A lot of people do that as well. So there's all kinds of different ways to fund these, and we've had people do partial cash, partial SBA. But there's like you can do ROBS and SBA. You can do all these different things. You can do a home equity line of credit. The acronym's HELOC. So you can do a HELOC. You can do all these different things, to put the financing together. But at the end of the day, you're going to end up in around that same number. More in like super expensive markets once we start getting into those and building those out. But that's it at the end of the day. And we can't make a lot of claims, Michael. That's one thing that's interesting about franchising is like when I was consulting, I'm like, you do these 3 things, you're going to make this much money. I can't really say that anymore because an earnings claim can get you in big trouble. But I will say that compared to other fitness concepts, it's a relatively low barrier of entry. And it can be, and I'm saying can be, right? It can be very lucrative as far as percentage of revenue as profit. So if you say compared to, I'm trying to think of another boutique fitness concept that everyone's heard of. How about Orange Theory, right? You're probably in at 750 to 800 to open. And if you look at, I think what their profit claims are, like 25+% of that can be profit. That's pretty good money. But if you could do a lot more than that in a much less, expensive investment, you could do multiple alloys, for that, obviously. And I think you could do much better from a profit standpoint for the same type of investment. So it's a good offering in the fitness space. Look, we target an underserved avatar because of the price threshold. It pushes us a bit older. So we really target when we're doing our demographics for real estate, 45 to 65 with money. And that's not really targeted in fitness. If you look at most fitness ads, it's like 30-year-old hot moms, right? Like running on a treadmill. And that's fine, except there's 800 other fitness concepts in those markets targeting those same people. If we only need 130 and we're targeting a underserved fitness market, which we are, it's not too difficult to go into the most crowded fitness markets and gobble up 130 people who are probably misplaced in a brand that they don't love. Maybe they're beat up. Like we're the only brand that can really work around injuries. If you're a 55-year-old guy that's an A player and owns a company, but you played college football and you had to have your knee replaced, you're not going to be able to go run on the treadmill at an Orange Theory, right? And so you're like, all right, I need something more specific to me. We're really, other than one-on-one training, which is really expensive these days, like we're the only brand that can accommodate that person. So that ends up being our avatar. And it just so happens they're underserved. They have a lot of money and they stick around forever. So one of our big claims is our retention rate. It's one of our differentiators. So, I think our average stay is like 3 years in our brand, whereas another brand is 5 months. So it's like, all right, you pay $150 a month and stay 5 months. That's a class-based concept. Are you going to spend $300 a month plus and stay 3 years? It's like, which customer do you want? I mean, it's a rhetorical question, but that's it in a nutshell. Like when you got to start with that, right? Does the franchise make money? Can the franchise get a good return on investment? Once you can answer that question, then it becomes about what do you want the day in the life to look like? Do you want purpose around what you do and all the other things that are super cool about the fitness space?
I would imagine that you guys have identified a couple of keys around that continuity model and retention specifically. Like, are there any characteristics that you found that keep people coming back month after month or even on a years-long basis? Like, is it important that they bring X number of friends in the business or that they show up for training X number of times per month? Have you guys dug that deep?
We have. So we've got all kinds of, the good thing about being in business forever is we have a lot of data, right? So the break point seems to be 8 times a month. So if somebody's coming in consistently 8 times a month or more, they're usually getting pretty good results. And mind you, one thing that also makes us a little bit different is we've got all these ways to measure results. Whereas if you go to say like an F45, and I'm not throwing shade at them. There's just a whole class of people that fit into that category. It's like, come try a free class, right? And you don't really know if anything's changing. Like, are you getting stronger? Are you moving better? What's going on inside of your body? We've got all these really cool scientific ways to measure what's happening.
Okay.
And so we're able to measure those over time. So there's ascension, like people can see their progress. That's stickier. But quite honestly, what drives the retention model, to that point was it's only 130. Now that's not the limit. You can push it up to maybe 150, but just think 130 makes a healthy model. There's an interesting British scientist. His name's Robin Dunbar, and he studied all kinds of ancient civilizations up to modern. And basically, what he's determined is, how many people can you have a cognitive relationship with, meaning you know them pretty well, outside of like your family and your very close friends. And it turns out it's 150 people. So it's sometimes called the rule of 150. It's called Dunbar's number. But it really speaks to the model. So a lot of people ask us that question, Michael's like, why is the retention so good? Are you choosing a certain avatar? Like, what makes it so sticky? And it's like, well, in a lot of ways, if you want to peel it back and keep it simple, the model itself, you only have 150 people. That means I'm going to know your name. I'm going to know your spouse's name. I'm going to know your kids' names. You're going to know me. You're going to know my spouse, my kids. I mean, it's like, it's much easier to put your arms around a small flock of people like that, right? And take care of them when you have personal relationships with everyone. If you're a boot camp model and you need 700 members and you're churning out 40 a month, right, or so or more, it's like, all right, there's just no possible way you're going to have that level of connection. Then it just becomes about the workout. And it's like, I mean, you can get a great workout anywhere. But can you build that community, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, this has been a great conversation, Rick. And as we approach the end of this talk, is there any topics that I did not ask you about that you want to discuss, or any points that you feel we didn't get a chance to touch on, to bring forward?
Well, I would say you didn't ask me about my stints training Usher and Madonna and all those famous people, but a gentleman never kisses and tells, so it's probably best left alone anyway. That's where the business started, and then we evolved into helping regular folks like me. But yeah, we have some really fun stories. Sometimes if we meet in person, we'll have some fun conversations over a couple of beers about stuff like that.
Or maybe a workout.
Maybe we'll work out. We'll eat some chicken. I know you're not drinking anymore. Good for you. We'll go at it that way. We'll be healthy about it.
Yeah, sounds good. Where can people go to learn more about what you guys do and to find you?
Just alloyfranchise.com is the easiest place. And if you have any questions about this or anything else, just shoot me a message there. Even if it's not directly about franchising, I'll help you in any way that I can. Like I said, I teach entrepreneurship, super passionate about it. So reach out if I can help you. And I'm all over social media, so you can find me there as well.
Awesome. This has been a great conversation. Thank you, brother.
Thanks, Michael. Appreciate it, bud.